Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Next Level Healing. My guest today is the very impressive influencer, Ross Dillon.
Thank you.
You are.
I appreciate that. I'll take the compliment.
He is best known as a storyteller on TikTok at Ross Talks Comics. He's garnered over 700,000 followers and nearly 300 million views, sharing captivating stories about comic books and superheroes. That's impressive.
Well, thank you. I'm just as surprised by those numbers as you are, I promise.
He has since, though, put his TikTok on hold to work with a remarkable team at psychedelics.com. Ross is directing his skills to help build educational platforms that raise awareness about the potential benefits of psychedelics and psychedelic-assisted therapy. Very cool.
Well, thank you. That was very nice.
Goodness, you are so accomplished.
Well, you know, a lot of that is because of why we're here. So, yeah, I mean, it's been a very interesting past 5 years of my life, to say the least.
How did you go from comics to psychedelics?
Well, I probably never would have started the comic book thing had it not been for psychedelics, actually. I had a couple experiences and kind of planned out my path, what I wanted to do. And then it worked. And then from there, it was, a lot of it was just the feeling like, I had access to these tools to be able to help me accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. There was a little bit of guilt, like what can I do to help other people? Not because it's not my job to tell them, hey, go do psychedelics or else, and you'll find all kinds of success, because that's not true. It's obviously not for everybody. But at the same time, if I could use my skills to, educate and make the conversation much bigger around the healing potential of the psychedelics and psychedelic-assisted therapy, then I felt like that's something I should probably do, because there are a lot of people, not only here in the United States, but around the world, that could desperately use some of these tools. A lot of people in need. So that's pretty much what took me over there. And, as soon as I made that decision, I saw that the company I'm at now, they posted a job listing, and I saw it within a half hour of them posting it, and I think they took it down immediately after I reached out. It happened real quick, that it was just a real perfect fit.
And what were they looking for? Somebody to build these educational platforms?
Yep, build on specifically with social media is what I do now. They obviously have a website, and they're working on several other things as well, but primarily they wanted me to take the initiative with social media.
Wow. And what was it, if you can describe it, because sometimes these things are hard to describe. What did psychedelics give you that if you had not had, you wouldn't have become?
Oh, a belief in myself. Just the ability to know I could do it. Just the ability, because I come from, I did a lot of theater and I did stand-up comedy and stuff like that. And then I fell into a pretty dark place for about 8 or 9 years. And it was, psychedelics kind of brought me back out and said, hey, why don't you take everything that you've done and everything you've been good at and combine it into one thing? And that turned out to be telling stories about comic books. So, and then it worked, luckily.
Did going into the dark place happen before or after you accessed psychedelics? Oh,
way before. Yeah, so my intro to psychedelics was in 2012. Okay. My father has Parkinson's disease.
Oh.
And this was about 2 years after he was diagnosed. So, as one does, you're online, you're searching for potential alternative treatments for Parkinson's, just out of curiosity. And I remember I came across an article it was a neurologist talking about how he wishes there were more studies on ibogaine. With Parkinson's disease.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, actually, I have a friend who's studying the effects.
I remember you telling me, and I would love to hear more about that.
Neurogenesis, and I understand that ibogaine has even more potential neurogenesis properties than psilocybin.
That's my understanding too. I couldn't point to you in exact anything on that. But that's my understanding too. And, they found, obviously with things like addiction, they found that ibogaine is incredibly successful at, not just putting a halt on it, but almost curing it, which is crazy. And this is after like one session.
Wow. Now, that one session though, because I have a friend who had brain trauma from physical trauma when she was a baby. And it was measurable on a SPECT scan. And this was probably 10 years ago at the time. And she, just out of desperation, turned to psychedelics and ibogaine. And that's a macro dose of ibogaine can be a Herculean ride.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I've heard it's about like a 24-hour experience. And it is, while most psychedelics are generally considered safe, Ibogaine does come with a little bit of risk if you have heart conditions and stuff. So, it is something that you have to be careful with if you're going into that. Now, if you're going somewhere, where it's generally illegal and you have professional guys, this is stuff that they should or generally do look for.
And we're not giving anybody
absolutely not.
This is just our information and our understanding of what this
exactly
is about.
Yeah, but once I kind of learned more about Ibogaine, that just kind of opened the door to like wanting to research all these other psychedelics. And that was right around the time that Johns Hopkins was getting all this, incredible, like $12 million, $20 million grants to, study the benefits of specifically psilocybin. And so I just kept up with it. I started reading every book I could get my hands on. And it wasn't until 7 years afterwards that I actually started taking it myself and kind of diving into that world.
Hey guys, studies are showing that 68% of people that watch podcasts regularly don't click the subscribe button. Do me a huge favor. If you like this content, click subscribe so other people know where to go for the cool stuff. Thank you. Let's talk about the safety stuff because I was so enamored when I read Recapture the Rapture by Jamie Wheal, and I discovered more deeply the scientific data that David Nutt came out with, and he is a neuropsychopharmacologist in the UK who has a company underneath him called, I think, Drug Safety, something of that nature. And he looked at different substances and charted out how safe they are to the user and to other people. And he looked at, I guess this is probably 25 different substances. And what was shocking is the one, of course, on top.
The most legal one of them all.
The most legal one and the most dangerous to himself and others is alcohol.
Yeah, 100%.
Followed by heroin, crack cocaine, and methamphetamine. I mean, that's pretty shocking.
Yeah.
And then cocaine, and then on number 6, and now we've got 2 of the most widely used is tobacco.
Yeah.
Wow. And then way down on the list, you've got cannabis and ecstasy and mushrooms way, way, way down to the bottom.
Yeah. And, I'm glad this information's finally coming out because, once 1970 came around and they, the war on drugs really started, we lost decades of potential research on psychedelics. Didn't we ever? Yeah. And that's a real shame, especially when you see where it is now. You kind of look back and wonder, where could it have been if scientists and researchers actually had access to study these in a controlled environment? So MAPS, is that an organization that you're, so Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies? Yep. Do you have a connection with them, or do you guys just put out information, or are you just kind of applauding each other as to? Yeah, and they've had a rough week. Yes, no, I've heard about this. Jamie mentioned that. So what has happened? Yeah, so is actually MAPS formed, I believe, as a company called Lykos Therapeutics, and that was going to be what they use for essentially therapeutic MDMA. And that went before the FDA. They went through 3 different, they have to go through 3 different trials of testing, and then the FDA gets to approve it. Now, back in June, they had an advisory committee, the FDA did, that basically, and they typically follow what the advisory committee says. And, that's where the advisory committee goes through everything concerning that particular drug. And the advisory committee just ripped it to shreds. I think like 7 or 7 out of 9 of the people on the advisory committee said that this should not be approved whatsoever. And then, the FDA's official decision came last Friday, and they said, yeah, we're not yet. At least you need to kind of go back and revisit some of these trials. Less safe, more toxic things are approved, and more safe, less toxic things are not approved. Yeah, I say that across the board. Yeah, and it's a difficult situation because since then, over the weekend, I don't know the exact details of this, so anyone listening, don't take my word for it. Just please go look. But there was a major journal that publishes a lot of these studies revoked some of the tests that MAPS did because I guess there were some pretty serious issues with how they conducted them. So, I can't say for sure. Like I said, I haven't really researched that just happened over the weekend, but they're getting hit from all angles right now. And it's MAPS and Lykos both. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But, at the same time, while obviously these tests need to be conducted fairly and they need to be conducted safely and appropriately, at the same time, people can both be sad that it wasn't approved and also understand why maybe it wasn't approved this go, while at the same time having sympathy from, the incredible amount of veterans specifically and anyone with PTSD that could have really benefited from this.
Yeah.
And now they're the ones that are going to have to wait until, and it may be another year before it even gets, in front of the FDA again. So it's just kind of a wait and see situation. But, what this does is this just opens up the underground market a little bit more for better or worse.
So you guys make, what is the goal of psychedelics.com in terms of making information available? Can you bring us up to speed on that?
Sure. So, kind of our motto is we're trying to bridge the gap between soul and science. We're trying to show, both sides of this because inevitably they're going to end up coming together, we believe. But, right now we have guides published for medically reviewed guides published for every psychedelic substance that you can imagine. We just last Friday released our guide for veterans specifically. And, in this, we're not saying, hey, go do psychedelics, hurry, go do it now, go grow your own. Like, that's not what this is about. It's just about getting people the information.
You're taking the research that exists and making it available. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're having actual professionals be medically review this to make sure, everything's in line. But at the same time, we also keep up with a lot of the news that's going on within the psychedelic field. And, we cover a lot of the other aspects of psychedelics. And that's why I love my job, because I handle their social media. Like they've let me cover things, like something like very common on psychedelics is people see like a grid. And that, I've been able to do content on that. And that, generally that's the content that performs the best because it's so commonly experience, but no one really talks about it. So we cover a lot of different ground, and it's just been amazing to work with that team of people because everybody's heart is in the right place. Everybody knows that it is not our job to tell somebody to go do psychedelics,
right? But
it is our job to have a conversation about
it. Right. What area of challenge, whether that's PTSD, anxiety, what area do you feel like psychedelics have, just from the knowledge base that you've been exposed to, have had the biggest benefit?
I think depression is definitely up there. I think anxiety is definitely up there. One that I've always found to be the most impactful is actually end-of-life therapy.
Gosh, I'm so glad you brought that up. Because here's an area where, if you've got somebody who's dying and they're terrified, and you have the ethical issue of people who've had near-death experiences don't fear death. But how do you give somebody the experience of...
And that's interesting because it's almost like there's a little bit of a similarity between a near-death experience and a psychedelic experience. You just walk away from both feeling a little more comfortable with the idea that, maybe, many people do still walk away thinking, okay, it's just lights out afterwards, but they're more comfortable with it. But a lot of people seem to come away with the belief that it feels like there's going to be a little something more, when the lights go out. And that's reassuring.
In Jamie's book, Recapture the Rapture, they looked at people who had near-death experiences, and there's a certain amount of time that people go into REM sleep. And if you're depressed, you go in fairly quickly, like in 60 minutes. If you're...
that's interesting. I actually didn't know that.
Just kind of normal, you go in about 90 minutes. If you're a happy person, you go in 100 minutes. If you've had a near-death experience, you don't go in until 110 minutes. So these people do tend to have medical similarities that show that they're happier and better adjusted. I've had a number of interviews on Next Level Healing of people that have had incredible near-death experiences.
I'm fascinated.
Including Eben Alexander, who was the brain surgeon who became more brain dead than...
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about. Yeah. Oh, he has a fascinating story. Yeah. I have not read his book, but I've certainly watched several of his interviews. That's a good get.
Yeah.
That's a good share for an interview. That's really good.
So, I'm just always interested when there's information out there that's not particularly readily available. There's another concept that I found fascinating, which is the concept of being beyond the pale, which is a reference to the English Pale. When the English had taken over Ireland, there was a portion of land that they considered acceptable and where, civilized people lived. And if you went beyond the pale, that's where murder and mayhem happened. And if you survived it and came back, you probably wouldn't be accepted. So the same sort of psychology exists with this.
A little bit, yeah.
Because it's just strange and weird and scary.
Yeah.
To a lot of people. So I love that you're bridging this, because obviously
it's so important.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Colorado, I believe, legalized psilocybin because they found that a single dose reduced violent crime and theft.
I'm not sure if that's the reason. That could have definitely played a role. I don't know. I believe it's just decriminalized there. I don't think it's fully legalized yet.
Oh,
I just think, I mean, I as far as I know, there aren't stores selling or anything there, but I'm pretty sure it's just not a focus on police, and you're allowed to carry up to a certain amount. And it's the same in Oregon. Now, Oregon actually opened up some like actual, like clinics almost, where you can actually go and have an experience. And the issue they're running into right now, which, the psychedelic industry is going to face regardless, is just the cost of it. It's very, very expensive to go into.
Expensive.
Just to go to one of these clinics and have to actually have a guided experience legally.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, a lot of people are going out of the country.
Yeah. There's obviously, you can go down to Costa Rica.
I have a client,
Jamaica,
who lives in Colombia, and it's pretty widely done down there.
Yeah. And in those countries, I think it's, I don't even know if it's, I think it is legal, but even if it's not, I'm pretty sure it's just kind of a gray area that they work in, that, they're allowed to do.
I just find it so fascinating that the legal, stuff is so dangerous.
It is.
Statistically. And so there was this conversation between Dr. David Nutt and one of the UK people. And he's like, well, I think we should open the discussion as to, why these things are illegal. And the person he was talking to, who had to do with the authority there, said, well, we can't compare legal and illegal. And he's like, well, why not?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
She says, because it's too dangerous. And he said, well, but the science is showing that it's not as dangerous as the... And they're like, yeah, but you can't compare legal to illegal. And he's like, well, why not? He says, because it's too dangerous. So there's this circular argument. There was no...
Yeah, there doesn't really make sense.
To have the conversation.
And I understand with certain substances, like, as much as I think LSD is such an incredibly understudied substance, the truth is there is bad LSD out there that you can get very sick, and it has killed people. It's called 25I. It's just got like a tiny little bit of LSD in it, and oftentimes, because it's cheaper to make, I'm assuming that, it's sold underground as LSD, and it is dangerous if you take it. But pure LSD, which you can actually buy a test and do it yourself. It's totally legal to buy the test, not the substance. But they're just like the graph shows, like it's pretty safe. I mean, sure. Like I don't know, and I've only heard this casually. So again, this is definitely not a fact, but I've always heard that if you were going to overdose on psilocybin mushrooms, you would almost have to eat like half of your body weight.
It's interesting
in like a half hour.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're bringing this up, because there's a lethal dose to the effective dose. When I was studying, it was my anatomy teacher when I was studying acupuncture. And acupuncture is, you're actually, licensed to be a deliverer of medical care there in California. So the effective dose to the lethal dose, when you look at alcohol, is very, very dangerous. And if you look at marijuana, or you're telling me mushrooms, it's like literally almost impossible to kill yourself.
Yeah.
Alcohol is really quite easy.
Yeah.
And people do it all the time.
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, and it does make us question, our political leaders, especially in the past, and the decisions that they made and why they made them, because it just doesn't make sense. And the fact that they did this without knowing the information on it, it's sad. But the saddest part is how much these substances can help people in need if they so choose to go down that path, and that's just been blocked completely. And in a lot of areas, it still is blocked. But I think one of my favorite parts about watching this quote-unquote psychedelic renaissance that we're in right now is the amount of universities that are opening their own psychedelic centers.
Yes.
Ohio State, Michigan.
UCLA.
Yes, they all are. And the biggest universities around the country, they are all getting into this because they see the potential benefits in it. So,
Johns Hopkins is also.
Yeah, Johns Hopkins, they were one of the first, I believe, to get actual federal grants to go do this, to go study it. And they have a great team there. I know Dr. Matthew Johnson. I don't know him. I know of Dr. Matthew Johnson, who's done a great job himself of going out on a bunch of podcasts and actually talking about, psychedelic assisted therapy and all the work they're doing. It's great to see. And at some point, I hope people's minds change on it. And another fascinating thing that is that currently right now, it is one of the only bipartisan topics within Congress, especially for veterans.
You mean both sides of the aisle are supporting it?
Yes. The bill that was added to the Defense Act that President Biden signed last December, that was co-sponsored by AOC and Dan Crenshaw of Texas, two complete opposites. Wow. And they worked together on that. And I know AOC, she's also pitched several times to increase funding for psychedelic research. But yeah, it is. I mean, I can't even. There's some names. I can't remember. Perry, also from Texas. He ran for president. I can't remember his first name, but he even had come out and said that he would try it. And these are some of the most diehard conservatives, people that generally you wouldn't think so. So it's definitely moving in the right direction.
Let's talk about the people that are terminally ill.
Yes.
I'd love to wrap that up.
Oh, of course.
Because this was so compelling.
It is.
If you take people, and I don't know what measure they used, but it was some test to determine, I don't know, dread of dying. and they gave them psilocybin. Mm-hmm. Was it a single dose or was it like 3 different doses? Do you remember?
I believe for end of life therapy, I believe they've done both. I believe they've done some with just 1 dose, along with psychotherapy. That's usually always attached to it. And then there are some that have done multiple doses. But
just a dose or 2 or 3, it made these people so much more okay.
Yeah, big doses too.
End of life.
Yeah, they're getting big doses. They're getting, I believe, between 4 and 5 grams usually.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're not seeing a couple pretty colors. They're talking to God.
Oh, okay.
I mean, metaphorically, they are talking to God. Like.
Or maybe really.
Maybe. But I mean, and you can go watch it. I'm sure you've seen them too. Documentaries on even on YouTube. You can just search for like end of life care with psychedelics, or how to change your mind. I know they covered this in Michael Pollan's documentary based on his book that's on Netflix. You have these 7-year-old ladies and stuff that have cancer going through this experience, and they're telling you straight up, it was the single most profound experience of their life. Yeah. And then you talk to their families. And their families will say, from the moment that they had that experience to the moment they died was the happiest they had ever seen them. Wow. And that's incredibly powerful, for someone who's with stage 4 cancer, who's about to pass away. Wow. So, yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think that's one of the most underutilized or underlooked at aspects of psychedelics.
Well, and it sort of wipes out the ethical issue because, you don't have to worry so much about harm if somebody's dying, and there's good evidence that they can have a much better experience of that. Yeah,
and like I said, this isn't, for people listening, this doesn't mean if you have someone dying, go and grow them mushrooms and give to them, because it comes with psychotherapy, and there's also a lot of other work that goes into it. It's not just the psychedelics, but that experience alone is just completely life changing.
Yeah,
I was pretty close to just being an atheist, not believing in anything. And by the way, there are people that take these and, they still keep their beliefs, and that's totally fine. But for me, I found something else within myself that I guess it almost felt like I had forgotten.
Well, and that's true of near-death experiences as well.
Those are so fascinating.
Yeah, people that have near-death experiences and come back, they might be an atheist before the experience, but afterwards they're like, no, I don't believe in God. I know God. Mm-hmm. Because there's this connection to something so much bigger than we are at a really profound level.
Yeah, and a lot of them come back, and when I say it, at least, like, they talk to God or they believe in God, like, that may not even be associated with any specific religion. Like, they don't, instantly become a Christian or a Muslim or something like that. It's just their own belief and their own connection to that deity that they felt in that moment. Yeah.
Right. Very cool.
Yeah, it is. It's such a fascinating topic too, and it's it's interesting because whenever I tell people what I do, it always becomes a conversation like, what? Like, how are you doing this? Is that legal? I'm like, yeah, what I'm doing is legal.
Well, it's again, just on the research.
Yeah. We're not selling any products whatsoever.
You're putting out information that exists. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy how much medical data is out there on a lot of subjects. Like Mark Gober was another subject of my show, and he wrote an End to Upside Down Thinking. And all he did was take the data that is very well substantiated, indicating that our consciousness is not located in our brain.
Yeah, there are a couple of studies like that. I know Sir Roger Penrose and Dr. Stuart Hameroff, I believe at Arizona State University. He's an anesthesiologist. they had the OR theory, where they basically explained that, you know, consciousness may exist within the microtubules of the brain at a quantum level. I don't understand what any of this means, by the way. I'm just repeating words. But that also could give it a reason to exist outside of the body.
Yeah. Mark Ober kind of describes our brain as being like a TV.
Yes.
And so consciousness is out there. We're just
tuning into it. Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting theory as well.
Suit is programmed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Kind of yeah, and you know, and the thing about psychedelics is when you go through these experiences, especially at larger doses, you know, it's very difficult to explain, but you get a feel for it. It's really, and for a lot of people, that's incredibly shocking. I remember for me, it was like, oh my God, like I've been wrong this whole time almost. So I mean, yeah, it's a beautiful thing for sure. And yeah, I mean.
And again, this is information only.
Yeah. Again, yeah. I mean, I like I said, I always say, like, I cannot advocate and tell somebody to go do this. However, I can have the conversation. I can talk about my experiences and what it did to me. But, you know, the psychedelics are not for everybody.
Yeah.
Like we know that there are certain conditions like bipolar and things like that, where they typically don't recommend you do psychedelics because it can have some harmful effects.
Yeah, I mean, the concept of a bad trip is a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And some people, don't. That's why the work that you guys are doing and the work that MAPS was doing was all assisted in environments where people knew what they were doing. They knew about dosages. They knew about purity of whatever the substance was. So as controlled an environment as was
exactly, yeah, and like we talked about, it's usually accompanied by some form of therapy, which is also good because you know, with psychedelics, you know, probably the most important part of it is how you integrate it afterwards. How you take what you learn and put that into your life, and having an actual trained psychotherapist or guide to help you do that can make a world of difference, and really taking. In turning and finding that success outside of the experience, and just kind of manifesting that into your everyday life. That's incredibly important.
Yeah, 100%. Wow. So if you were to go back in time and talk to yourself when you were 10 years old, what would you want to say in 5 minutes?
Nothing.
You were the only person who said that.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I've thought about that before. I would not. If I could go back to any point in my life and say anything, I would not say anything at all, because I love exactly where I am right now. I have
had to go through that to get to where you
exactly, and like I would not be, if without all the hardest moments of my life, I would not be right here right now.
Beautiful.
And so I don't want to say anything that gives me an edge, that gives me like a cheat to get ahead or something like that. I don't want any more money than I've had in the past, because any little thing could that I tell myself in the past could change where I am right now, and I'm very, very happy right now.
Oh wow! So, what a beautiful statement.
Oh, thank you.
Love that answer. So if
I would like to smack myself upside the head for a couple of things I did, but I don't know if I'd say anything.
Wow, love it. So if you had a megaphone and the whole world was listening, what would you say for 5 minutes?
If I had that's a tough question. That's a good question. I would probably, if I was talking to the whole world, I would probably use that 5 minutes to just try to explain how it seems that we have forgotten who we are. We no longer take care of each other. We no longer care for each other. We look at people that have a different belief as our enemy, almost like a different species of human. And we need to learn to come together, because the world, I mean, and not to be, pessimistic, but the world's not looking too hot right now. Things aren't going the way it could be going. And, I think a lot of that starts with how we treat each other.
Thank you for saying that.
Oh, you're welcome.
No, I couldn't agree more. No. And I think if we were, Zach Bush talks about this, so are you a Zach Bush fan? But, we're all lonely as heck. And, and the reason we're suffering so much, especially in our culture, is that there isn't the connection. Yeah. There isn't the community. There isn't the support. There's all this.
Yeah. And, there's
all this crazy fighting over, like Gulliver's Travels.
Yeah. And, obviously, we have things now like the internet and social media that do make that more difficult. But I also think that they can be used in a way to actually bring us closer together.
100%.
I mean, when you get on the internet, 99.999% of people on there are great people who would stop in an instant to help a stranger. But it's always the loudest ones that are, the ones that are out to cause trouble and stuff like that. And those are the people that usually get the loudest voices. And, maybe it's time for everybody else to be a little more vocal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very well said.
Thank you.
Ross, I'm so delighted that you've been here with us today. How would you like people to find you?
Honestly, I'm hopefully going to get back into doing more of my TikTok stuff soon. So, I mean, if you want to go to at Ross Talks Comics on TikTok, you can find me there, or psychedelics.com, or, you can, I run all the social media at psychedelics.com. So literally our handles are psychedelics.com on all the platforms. So if you're looking for more information on psychedelics and how it may be able to potentially benefit you, or if you're just curious to learn about other people's experiences, that's what I would recommend.
Fantastic. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for...
Well, thank you. No, this was fantastic. I love your setup. I saw you got some chickens outside. I love it. This is great. Beautiful new piano.
Well,
this is wonderful.
I'm glad to know you're my neighbor now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'd move in a second.
Folks, thank you for joining us here on Next Level Healing. We'll see you on the next episode coming up really soon. This podcast is intended for the purpose of providing information and education. It does not provide advice and is not meant to be used for any self-diagnosis or the replacement of any kind of licensed professional. The creators and individuals appearing here do not endorse any specific tests, positions, medications, products, or procedures. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.